I got a diva microphone tonight too.
Oh.
Yeah. Couldn't let you outdo me.
Okay. He's not putting up our PowerPoint.
It'll get there in a
He
second.
wants us to do it from memory.
That might be bad.
That might be rough.
Although it might not be as bad as the PowerPoint.
There we go.
All right, so we've been talking about modern challenges to the family. And so we talked about the modern couple.
We did.
Talked about a lot of challenges that couples face because they're the foundation of the family. And then we talked about addiction, but we really just sort of illustrated family dysfunction. We illustrated relational challenges.
What makes addiction possible.
And then last night we talked about the baggage that we bring into relationships and the need to unpack that baggage, process different things so that it doesn't impact our connection with others.
That was the question that I received after last night was, why baggage? Where does it fit into this puzzle that we're putting together for the week and culminating tonight? And that is, many times the baggage can be the result. Many times we think about the baggage being the result, but hopefully what we talked about last night showed that the baggage comes with you. The baggage doesn't happen because of addiction or even with addiction, but it's something you bring with you yourself. And so I wanted to address that early tonight with that question that I was given.
Well, and so tonight we're going to talk about identity confusion, especially as it relates to sexuality and gender, which is a hot button topic and one that might get us canceled.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know. It's cancel culture liable to get us.
And you might be thinking, well, what in the world does this have to do with everything else that we've talked about? Like, did we throw this in as sort of like a side note because of stuff going on? Or is there a connection to everything else that we've talked about?
That's our job tonight, right?
So I'm sure that you're all familiar, maybe not familiar, but you've seen some of the chaos going on in our world surrounding boys who want to be girls and girls who want to be boys, and who can use what restroom, and there's a big deal about women's sports, biological males competing in women's sports. There's a number of states that have been in the news because they've been trying to pass laws that restrict some of the surgeries for minors.
That's right.
To make the transition, attempt the transition from male to female or female to male.
And a lot of those happening in the Bible Belt where we think the church is the strongest, especially with Tennessee and Vanderbilt facing those lawsuits.
And so I want to tell you a story tonight. A story that is terrifying.
It is. But we're all adults in here, and so it's time for us to look at this story. It's time for us to see this.
But a story that I think pulls together in a nice, neat package everything that we've talked about, but in connection to this confusion of, gender identity and sexuality.
Sure. Would now be a good time for us to say that we're not going to cover all of identity confusion? Let's be. We're
not even going to cover all of identity confusion as it relates to gender.
Correct. So please don't have that in your mind that this is all about this subject. We're not going to touch topics such as furries that are big in the news as well. We're going to leave that alone. What are y'all? They're grinning and laughing back there when I said that word. We're not going to touch that this time. We'll see if we get canceled or not.
Now you got to pay extra for that one.
Okay, all right. There's more of a charge for that one. Okay, Good.
Now, so there's another reason why I went down this rabbit hole.
Okay.
Right? Because it turns out that kids in foster care are more likely than kids in the general population to identify as LGBTQIA
Alphabet.
plus PTZ.
Alphabet.
Yeah. And the reason, well, part of the reason for that makes some sense in light of some of the reasons why those kids end up in foster care in the first place. Especially when you talk about things like sexual abuse.
Yes.
Right? So the confusion that is generated in a child from sexual abuse creates confusion regarding their own sexuality, confusion regarding their own gender.
Yes.
You know,
all definitions are challenged. Everything's thrown
everything is challenged. So, but we're not even really talking about that.
Not
Some of the reasons why, if you heard some of the stories, you could completely understand why this kid. Well, you know, one kid said, if I were a boy, this wouldn't have happened to me.
That's right.
Which is not technically true.
Right.
But is a way of trying to understand what's happened.
And I think most of our audience, they know that we work at Child Haven together. They know that this is the population that we are keenly aware of, and that's why we would follow this topic.
But what is getting the most attention and what has really ramped up in the past few years is not explained by that.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
In fact, there are a lot of, and it's teenage boys and teenage girls, but the primary population is teenage girls.
That's right.
That are struggling with gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria or whatever they want to label it. But what's different about it is, like, there's been no previous indication of any of that kind of problem. So they even coined a phrase, rapid onset.
Yes. Because
it just seems like so many are getting caught up in the transgenderism thing. Yes. And why would teenagers be getting caught up in that, especially teenage girls, in epidemic proportions?
That's what we're going to talk about.
Well, so let's tell the story.
All right, here we go. This is true. This story is true. There's no fiction involved, and we're not watering it down, right?
No, I even have to get my cheat sheet out so that I can remember it all.
We're not watering it down. We're going to give you the details.
All right. This is the story of a girl named Chloe. And if you want further details, you can see me afterwards, and I can direct you toward some interviews where Chloe tells her story in the media in her own words, right? So that's where all of this came from. So it's public, it's out there. So here's Chloe's story.
She bravely has offered it.
Chloe grew up on the West Coast. She grew up in California. She admittedly grew up as a bit of a tomboy. Liked some more boyish things, related more to boys. It turns out she didn't know it during that time, but since then it's been identified that she is on the autism spectrum,
okay,
which impacts her sensory,
yes,
her ability to pick up on social cues.
Any perception is skewed.
And emotional regulation. So she was prone to outbursts,
yes,
as a child. And so that was, well, as she has some social difficulties later, that makes some sense, right? She started puberty. Can we talk about puberty?
We are.
Okay. She started an early puberty about the age of 9, which there's some interesting discussions about why that kind of thing happens and so forth. And, you know, all the hormones we eat and various things, but puberty began to impact her socially,
okay,
because it kind of messed up her fitting in with those boys.
All of a sudden, she looks different.
Kind of messed up the tomboyish thing, But she also didn't fit in with the girls her age because, well, she started developing
All of a sudden,
early.
she looks different.
So she's kind of isolated from both groups. So she began to develop body image issues,
Okay.
Which is typical of teenagers at puberty because, well, look how awkward, right?
It's an awkward stage, is what we label it.
I remember big old pimples on my forehead and stuff.
Yes, yes, yes.
I mean, I look good now, but then that was rough. But it's especially for females.
That's true.
Females have a tendency to be much more self-conscious with regards to physical appearance. And some of that may be culturally driven, but some of that may be more innate to the nature of the female.
I agree. But keep in mind, everything we're talking about so far is at age 9. What you're seeing on the board, as you can tell, doesn't start till age 12. So we have three approximate years until we get there.
So she mentions the fact that she's also on social media, particularly Instagram.
At 10 and 11 years old?
Yes. And what she's exposed to primarily on Instagram, are those filtered photos, right? Where with all, all of these beautiful women in bikinis or whatever. I mean, she's on the West Coast, but you've all seen the social media posts. They're filtered, and you got the duck face, and you're posing so that you can make sure to accentuate certain things. So she's exposed to all that very early on, and gets this ideal of beauty.
That's somebody's ideal.
Somebody's ideal of beauty. And so as puberty progresses, she says that it was disappointing for her. Mm-hmm. It was disappointing for her. See, she never had the experience of wanting to be a boy or thinking that she was a boy. She wanted to go through puberty and to develop into one of these beautiful women that she had.
These ideals.
These ideals.
Somebody else's ideal.
And she was disappointed then that, well, she's thin. She's not voluptuous and curvy.
Okay.
Like the ideal of beauty that she had.
She's only 10 or 11, she's still developing.
And so she begins to sort of question her attractiveness to others, but also her attraction to others. Because it kind of works both ways.
It's going to repel.
Who's going to be interested in me? Who am I going to be interested in? Wow. Starting to think about that at 10, 11,
10
going
11.
into 12.
So we're still not to the first stage yet.
My 4-year-old has a crush on one of the teenage boys.
Oh, does she now?
Yeah.
Okay.
That ain't... Yeah, but it starts young.
Wait till they turn 21. Then talk to me.
So obviously, she really starts comparing herself to others, right? And comparing herself to family. She comments in the interview that she's smaller chested, and that even though she started puberty early, she was quickly surpassed in development
by others
as they hit puberty. Surpassed in terms of the view of the ideal, right?
And surely we know that. Surely we're aware of that. We're not talking about anything you don't know. Girls comparing the numbers on their undergarments, comparing the numbers on everything as they develop.
But here's something interesting. She mentions that she frequently heard very negative perceptions of womanhood.
So we're leaving the physical, now we're going into the mental? At age 11?
That she was exposed to a lot of feminist content.
At age 11?
Yes. Well, in part because she's on the West Coast.
Okay.
She acknowledges that there was a lot of that mindset in her family, an extended family, And of course, she's exposed to that online, on the social media that she's a part of. And what that content looks like is that there's an evil patriarchy that controls women, and that men are trying to take away women's rights, right? And I think we've all seen some of that kind of outcry or discussion, like with the overturning of Roe v. Wade,
Yes,
and things like
absolutely.
that, right? But she was exposed to a lot of this feminist content, and the maternal role of women was never really, she was never really exposed to that, and it certainly was not talked about very positively.
So we're talking about the way she saw her mother and the way that her dad and her mom interacted?
We're talking about
What she never saw. Okay. I'm with you. Go right ahead.
in fact, she said, and I quote, "I wanted nothing to do with being a woman. Why would I?"
Okay. So do we know then what she's seeing at home? This is yes, this is no. Yes, we know, we now have a good picture from her own words what she's seeing at home. All right. And we're still not to age 12. Go right ahead.
So then we get connected in some way with the LGBTQ community.
Social media.
And the word community stands out because for her, this offered her a sense of community,
Belonging.
right? Because she didn't really belong with those boys earlier on.
No.
Puberty kind of revealed that.
It did.
But she didn't really belong with those girls because that didn't work out really well for her. She thought she was developing into a woman, but she didn't really fit in that Instagram community.
The ideal.
So she was ripe for wanting to be embraced by some community. And so right away, she thought she found her people. And not only a sense of community, but really this offered a comprehensive solution to what she perceived as all of her problems.
Everything.
Right? You could pull it all into one thing.
And there's your answer.
And so she began to question her sexuality and her gender.
Okay.
Because here is the solution that's offered, and it seems pretty simple because it's one solution to the whole thing. All of your problems are tied up in the fact that actually you should be a boy.
How quickly does that LGBTQ alphabet grab onto one that's this right?
Well, we're still not quite 12 yet.
So we're still 11
I mean,
years old.
we're right there. We're
Almost there.
Yep.
Okay, here's a timeout. How long does it take that community in social media to respond to one that's this young, this tender, this ripe for the picking? Do you know?
This confused.
This confused. We know for sure they will have enough responses to answer all these questions within the first day. Now, I think it's a lot less than that, but within the first day, they are grabbed. All right, in a row.
And we don't want to talk about it.
No, I know.
Unless we just preach.
I know. I know.
Okay? So she says, so I decided I was a boy. I came out to my sister, came out to some at school, but especially came out online because that's the community.
That's
right?
where she was safe.
She wrote a letter to her parents explaining, I wanted to be their son and be known by a new name. I can't imagine as a parent reading that note.
Wouldn't sleep that night.
So they went to a therapist
Okay.
at
We've been
age
talking
12.
about unpacking the baggage, going to a therapist if you need to.
So here we are at age 12.
So now we're here. Okay, we're here at 12.
So, but what that says at the top of that slide is started transition. What it doesn't say is unpacked all the baggage we just talked about
We're going to start medication.
that brought to this point. Well, she says that the full picture of her mental health was never explored at that point. that it was taken as gospel that she said, "I'm a boy,"
By the professionals that they went
by
to?
the professionals.
Okay.
And her dad was told that transitioning was the course of treatment for this kind of
the
course of treatment.
Okay.
Not an option, but the course of treatment.
But we think that's only because she was on the West Coast. But we're finding out that the lawsuit's in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I don't think it's only on the West
Yeah.
Coast anymore, do y'all?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
In fact, her parents were told that the risk of suicide is high if we don't affirm by transition.
So if I'm a parent and I hear that if I don't let her do what she thinks is best because she's been consumed by this social media, then the parent is going to hear that I'm making it possible for her to be more suicidal?
I mean, would you rather have a trans child or a dead child?
Wow, what a question. That's where we are.
So then, Chloe is referred by a gender specialist
Let's not chase that rabbit, okay?
to an endocrinologist
Or that one.
who said that she's too young. She's too young.
Oh, so one that was honest and okay.
So they got another referral
How do we know that, right?
to an endocrinologist who did sign off on her starting puberty blockers.
Okay. So we're 12.
And
We found professionals that let us do what we want to do.
testosterone.
Oh. So now we're 13?
See, the transition piece looks like a social transition,
Ah, my
which
parents.
means we cut your hair, we let you wear boys' clothes, and we present you as a boy, and we refer to you with those male pronouns, and you get to pick a male name, and so it's a social transition.
And for a girl, she tries to hide her development.
But very quickly, at just the next year, at age 13, we start physically.
Now we're doing the chemicals.
Yeah, we put you on puberty blockers because we don't want you to continue to develop as a woman because that's what your body recognizes you as.
What nature is
So we
different.
want to block that.
Okay. Then we have to add testosterone to it.
And I didn't tell you I was going to say this, but
Uh-oh.
I don't know what drug she was on, but Lupron is one of the big drugs that they talk about using
Yes.
in this. It's the same drug that they use to chemically castrate sex offenders.
So we see how difficult this is and how serious this is, and she's 13. And we haven't got to the worst part.
Now, socially, she's in about the 8th grade, right?
That would be about 14.
People notice the change in appearance, obviously.
Sure.
You start showing up to school and presenting as a boy.
And she no longer wanted to be called Chloe. She wanted to be called,
I
Cole?
don't
is that right?
I think it was.
Cole? Okay.
No,
Chloe.
no, her last name is Cole, so I don't think that was it.
Okay,
But
all right.
she got harassed because, well, that's how, sadly, that kids can be mean.
Cruel.
But you're also going against everything that they perceive as reality. She missed out on certain developmental tasks because being a teenager as a female is different than being a teenager as a male. So if you live as a teenage male, you miss out on the development of a teenage female, right?
And we're not talking about physical. We're talking about mental and social.
Yes, mental and social. In fact, she talked a little bit about her dating, right? Because that's what teenagers start to do at 15, 16, right?
Right. Who are we going to sit at the movies with?
So she says dating was extremely complicated. She used the word confusion. She would fantasize about being a male with a female partner, but she felt no emotional attraction to females. So there was a lot of confusion.
All that
there.
confusion continues.
Yeah.
So we're 4 years in and we're confused still, but we're doing chemicals and we're doing transition Okay.
Do you know where she turned to try to make some sense out of some of these feelings and questions about, okay, if I'm a boy, I'm supposed to be attracted to females, but you know where she turned?
I'm afraid to ask. You're going to say professional, I think.
No, I'm going to say the internet.
Oh, no.
And
Internet.
as a result, she developed a porn addiction.
Okay. So we not only do we have one massive weight of confusion, now we're adding more elements to add to that confusion. Okay.
And since we're on the internet, and, well, it's kind of weird, awkward socially at school, we turned to online dating.
Okay. Anybody here think that's safe? Okay, just checking. Especially when we're 16, right? Okay.
Well, so she was met with abuse, and she was taken advantage of by online perpetrators, seeking pictures and treating her like some kind of fetish.
Because by their definition, she would be. Sadly, not that we would think that way, but they would, because they're not wanting something for her. They're wanting something from her. All right, go ahead.
She commented that she talks about a time where, somewhere around this time, she was groped in a classroom by a peer. And she mentions that she knew women and peers who had been assaulted, raped, etc., and she had lived with a fear of that happening.
And now it's come true.
So she got binders. Do you know what a binder is?
Yes. We're concealing development, correct?
Yes. It's a chest, and they get it really tight.
And as time goes on, we're what, 6 years, 7 years into puberty?
Yeah.
And so we're binding. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We're all adults. We understand that. Okay, we're moving on.
Very uncomfortable and laborious experience to go through every day to do that.
I would imagine so.
So, obviously, the thing to do is to just get them removed.
Surgery?
Yep. Double mastectomy. You know the surgery that cancer patients may have with...
Removal.
Yeah.
At age what? What does that say up there? Age what?
15. But now, keep in mind, these are actually healthy breasts that are completely functional.
Developing her for her future. Okay.
But this is treated as though it's just the next step in the process. Like, you've started transition, like this is just the natural next step in the process.
It's a logical step from the time that we were 12.
So she says that in the months leading up to this surgery, she acknowledges depression and suicidality. And that she was put on medication to address some of that, which I don't know if it's the medication itself or not, but the suicidality increased over time leading up to this.
Even with the medication that's supposed to help.
Well, you know, there's big warning labels on that medication that says may cause suicidality. No. A month or two. All right, so she has the surgery. A month or two following the surgery, well, actually, it's really graphic and painful to hear her describe the first time she takes the bandages off and looks at her chest and sees the scarring and sees the bruising and sees that actually this really doesn't look anything like the male chest, the ideal male chest.
Wasn't what she imagined, even in her own mind. Okay.
And so within 2 months following the surgery, she says she began to miss her feminine features and her softer form. So much so, Kip, that she bought makeup, skirts, and dresses to wear in the privacy of her own room. Not even to let her family see, but as part of her process of grieving.
That's true.
What she had lost.
What was no longer possible for her.
And then She took a psychology class, of all things. And the chapter on parenting and child development hit her like a ton of bricks.
I'm sure.
Because she realized, for the first time,
At age 18.
what breasts and breastfeeding meant to the development of infants.
Which she wanted.
That whole maternal aspect that was completely neglected and not talked about. Well, she says she actually had never given any thought to kids, but now all of a sudden thought maybe one day she might like to have kids. And
Now?
well, so she really started grieving the loss of that ability. Because you don't undo that surgery.
It's permanent.
And so she declared her desire to detransition. Oops.
She wants to reverse all of this?
Yeah. Oops, I messed up. I was wrong. Let's...
Okay.
Seems like all
this
that
is
could have
not
been
good.
avoided.
Yes, it could. It should have been avoided. And
But-
that's why the lawsuits are there, right?
That's why the lawsuits are there. She's got lawsuits pending against, I forget who exactly it was, but the medical, and she talks about how she did not receive help or support from that same medical community who rushed her down. This is the treatment. This is the path. This is the next step of transition.
Okay.
Because that doesn't fit the... But if the treatment is affirmation of what you say you are,
At age 12.
then why is now that you're 18 and say, oh, I'm actually the girl I was in the first place, why are you not automatically supposed to affirm that? What's the difference?
It doesn't fit the political point of view now.
Ouch.
It doesn't fit the masses. All right, I think our audience is there.
Yeah, but where is there?
Let's go find out. Here we go. How old were you when you began answering this question? Now, the group from North Jefferson that's here, I've hit y'all with this question, so y'all have to be real quiet right now. Appreciate y'all coming, but not right now. Gotta be quiet. Who am I? This is biblical. That's why we're here. It's biblical in the question. Who asked this question, Gary?
This little guy named Moses.
Okay.
So in Exodus chapter 3, Moses is keeping the flock of his father-in-law. And he's in the wilderness, and he sees this bush that's burning but not being consumed. And God speaks to him out of this bush. And God says, come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?
Okay.
The whole question is about his competency to do this task, right?
How he sees himself.
But it starts with just the simplicity of his identity.
That's it.
Who am I?
Who am I? What we want to show you is in that development. You can call it teenage years. You can call it adolescence. It seems like that's something that's rampant these days. Adolescence never seems to end. But we have 3 points that we want you to see. And we're going to talk about those 3 to talk about this question.
Well, so the primary task of adolescence, developmentally, right, is to answer this question, right? So that as you move into adulthood, you have an identity.
That's correct.
Right?
That's how you move to the next stage.
So this is, the foundation for that is laid earlier on, right? So, you know, when your kids play house,
There you go.
right? And they are copying
They have to know how to play house.
the first things that they've seen, which is
Okay.
what happens in a house, right?
That's right.
And so they start copying the roles that they see others play. Now, if somebody comes up to you even today and introduces themselves to you and then asks you who you are, you respond with your name
Right?
and then maybe one of the roles you play.
I would assume so.
Like, I'm a counselor, I'm a minister, I'm a father, right?
Sure.
Roles.
Sure.
What did we look at with Chloe's development? Did we see role confusion?
Complete.
Role confusion?
She didn't know the positive nature of being a female, and had a skewed view of what the male she thought was.
But since this task really comes in adolescence, this is why teenagers sometimes sort of go through so many different phases, right?
Yes.
Because they're trying on different roles. They're trying on different hats. They're trying to figure out, well, who am I?
Right.
You know?
We call it awkward
who am
stage,
I?
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the task. So what forms the identity? What goes into creating my identity and who I am?
How many people do we have in our background that we would point to in that time frame of our lives? Who would you point to in your life that would be defining those roles? I think we've talked about quite a few things already this week. So somebody give us an example here. Y'all been quiet the whole time. We haven't let you talk. Who do you think of? Parents, some friends, some grandparents. Okay. Say it again. Okay, teachers and coaches. Well, that's a danger, isn't it? But it's true. But it's true. Oh, okay. All right. So we have people that we're using to define roles to define the lesson. All right. What's next?
So let me read Acts 7. So you remember Stephen is a Jew, and he rehearses some of the Jewish history.
Yes,
well,
he does.
He gets to the Moses point too. So in verse 20 he says, "At this time Moses was born. He was beautiful in God's sight. He was brought up for 3 months in his father's house, and when he was exposed," well, they were afraid he was going to be killed, so they put him in the basket and sent him down the river, right? "Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own. And Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in his words and deeds."
His people were different.
Yeah, so he's born to the people of Israel.
Right.
And we learn from the account in Exodus that he gets to be raised by his mom.
That's right.
But we're also told that he's adopted into Pharaoh's household, and he's raised as an Egyptian.
As Pharaoh's son.
So he has a different, there's a uniqueness to his identity because of that the other Israelites just raised as slaves didn't have, because of who his people were.
So he had a confident strength from within because of who his people were and not slaves. Do we see that? Because the people are going to assign the values. What are the values? How do we get to the values, Gary?
Are we moving that fast already?
Are we? We're still on people? So people can do more.
Well, think developmentally. I don't get to choose the initial people, right? The family that I'm born into, the environment that I live my childhood in.
Mom and dad are not our choice.
So we've talked about some of, in previous nights, some of the dysfunction of families.
Yes, we
and
have.
the impact of that on children.
We certainly have.
And so I don't get to choose my people. But there's there's cultural things that are a part of that. There's cultural heritage that's a part of that. Not just what happens in that little household.
Right.
The good and the baggage that's brought into that family. And we're in that. And that contributes to who we are. You know, some people will, when you ask them who they are, well, I'm third generation, right? This is my
There's
people.
something behind them.
This is my people. But teenagers and adolescents, they start to push away from you as their people,
That's
right?
Want to check something out different.
And they're pursuing other relationships, right? Because, well, you know, I got to develop my own identity.
I've got to have different options.
I can't just be a copy of you.
Exactly. I have to have my
And
own.
I've learned from you and I've developed from you, but I've also got to develop my own identity.
Okay.
And then what's really cool is that as adults, because guess what? Identity continues to develop. Me answering the question of who I am today at 39 is different than the way I would have answered the question at 29 or 19.
I would hope so.
Yeah. In part because I have made choices about the people that I most associate with.
So as we learn,
And
we
spend time
change the
with.
people, we change the definition of who I am.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
So, but that's another thing about this. A 12-year-old, sits in front of you and answers the question, who am I? As I am a... Well, okay, at that moment, so we do surgery to match that?
That's where our world is.
Well, you know, one day my 4-year-old is a pirate. Hey, just a few minutes ago, I was a bumblebee.
Okay.
But people, all right? But that leads to the values, right? Because values are choices. Values are choices.
That leads right back into our discussion of the dysfunctional home. The choices that we make within the home. The choices that we make of how. Do you remember those labels that we gave? The mascot, the scapegoat, the enabler, and on and so on. Okay, so those are our choices that make values.
Okay. Well, let me read to you, keeping with the theme of Moses.
Okay, we're staying with Moses.
Hebrews 11, right? So the Hebrews writer also talks about Moses. And he says in verse 24 of Hebrews 11, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking for the reward.
He made a choice.
You know, when we talk about things like your people, and maybe we begin to identify that your people were highly dysfunctional.
Okay.
Some people look at that as a prison.
A crutch.
Well, I mean, depending on which angle you're coming from.
Okay.
Depends on how badly you want to change. You can't change the people that you came from and the environment you grew up in, but you can start to make some choices as to what you are going to prioritize and you are going to value, just like Moses did.
That changed his life.
That changed his identity.
Okay. So he changed his people. He changed his values. That changed his story and his identity.
But who is going to be there, and at what point in your development to offer you choices and encourage you to make them and help direct you toward proper values?
Those closest to me. Those I'm around every day?
Well, I'm just thinking about Chloe and the choices that she started to make, some of which were in secret because she was trying to figure out the confusion that she had about her people.
She was isolated and alone.
And her identity.
There was no other input. She had pulled away, right?
So her people became this online community,
And that's the only connection.
and they directed her choices.
So that's the only connection she had, and they took control. All right? Do we see that? Do y'all see that? Do you see how important the church family is? Now with this young lady obviously not having that, and now we have these 3 points of how do we make contact? But in the church, how many times have we seen this person kept at arm's length? Has that ever happened? Never. That wouldn't happen in the church, would it? Oh yeah, I hear him. Oh yeah, over here. Oh yeah. This is why it's so important for us to talk about this subject in this way, to see this one life that we've detailed some of, to see what we can do.
But so values and choices, and if I'm one of your people, I'm going to try to help you in your choices. But what I can't do is just always tell you what to do.
That's right. I'm going to
Because then those aren't choices.
Right, you're being forced.
So this isn't just like I need to teach you values of right and wrong. That's not quite the value. Yes, that's part of it, but that's not.
I can't tell them.
No, because if it's your identity, it has to be what you chose.
Oh. So I have to give them options. How do we give them options? How do we give them options? Okay.
Help them learn to think logically about and rationally and evaluate and discern, right?
Okay.
But if I only just do what you tell me to do,
It's not my story.
well, it's not my identity. I'm living your
It's
identity.
not my values. It's not
Now,
the people I've chosen.
the story piece, though, the story piece also contributes to this idea that the answer to who I am is continually developing through our whole lives.
It's ongoing.
Because if we were to ask this group to answer Moses' question, right? Who is Moses? How would you answer that? If I didn't know anything about Moses and I said, who is Moses? How would you identify Moses to me? Yeah, but you'd have. How do you express that to me? You tell me his story.
There we go.
You tell me his story.
Then we know he is the Savior of his people. Okay.
So I just think about Chloe as a young woman telling her story to these media outlets, right? And it's still a story of confusion
Right.
because this is a story of chaos.
Let's show them why. Here comes the heavy part. You ready? This is why you came. This is what we want you to see. Aren't y'all proud that he printed this instead of handwritten this time? I'm getting a few yeses on that one. What's the center word?
Dysfunction.
Dysfunction. We've talked about dysfunction from a standpoint of a couple before marriage. We've talked about that same set of principles for couples that are mid-age.
But we may need to clarify a little bit.
Okay.
And that is, like, every family has some level of dysfunction.
Oh, okay.
Period.
And we're not judging here. We've not been judging the whole week. But we're recognizing what dysfunction creates.
Yeah.
We're recognizing the characteristic traits that dysfunction welcomes. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. What do you see up here?
I see every element in Chloe's story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Our time is clicking away. Is there anything up here that you see on this slide that shocks you? We can go. Gary and I can go through each one about an hour apiece, and we don't have time. We have 5 minutes left. What do you see here? Confusion. That the confusion for everything in every aspect of her life, every aspect of dysfunction within the house, every aspect of people, values, and story, even though it's ongoing, everything is based in this. With a critical household that does not support, full of confusion.
All right, so remember, okay, it's one thing for this to be the environment. It's another thing for this to be the environment in which you are developing.
Okay.
Especially in the most formative years of your development.
I think this is normal, if that's where I'm developing. That's how feminism takes hold, because I think that's the way it's supposed to be. That's how you identify yourself. It's what you've seen in your house. It's what you've seen with the parent that is the same sex, gender, and the opposite gender.
But broaden the system, right?
Okay.
We're not just talking about it being in a house. We're talking about this is the society in which we currently live.
Okay. I think I've read somewhere that we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. Okay.
Somebody had something in the back, I think.
I didn't. Okay. Okay. Taking advantage of her vulnerability. Not just physically, but in the way that she thinks. That's correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And that's what we've talked about at Child Haven, is the trauma that our children are facing.
I see the abuse of the parents. Exactly.
The abuse from the parents?
Exactly.
Okay. So we're broadening it out. How do we solve this?
Whoop.
Every woman here went through most of the things there, and they didn't turn out that way because they didn't have access to the evil that she had access to.
The social media piece? Okay.
And the incompetence.
You've only got 3 minutes.
I know. And the word I wanted to put on there, but you deleted, which was malevolence.
I think too is just not being active. I mean, in your children's lives.
Okay, being involved?
Being involved.
Okay.
Or allowing them to have what we call in education is to have a voice and to express their emotions to you and to explain to them what they're feeling. Not say you're feeling this, but let them tell you, hey,
Sure.
I'm feeling this. What does this mean?
Right.
So giving them an opportunity to ask questions about, but obviously Chloe had no one but social media to go to.
Which is where she went.
In order to ask questions.
And as they're younger, we know we have a higher percentage of input. But as they get to be teenagers, especially mid to late teen years, we know that our percent of influence on their lives has diminished tremendously. And that's a difficult thing.
Let me ask you something, though. Where do you think this came from in that family? Right? I mean, look, if this is the dysfunction of society, yeah, somebody may want to point the finger at those parents, but those parents came out of confusion. Like, this is a horrible cycle in society that's got to be broken.
That's why everybody needs to know his story. Until you know God's story, you don't know your own.
So we as the church have to break that cycle. We as the church have to be the ones to show a different way.
God's people, as a family,
Okay?
God's people, who rear our children in God's ways. And they see that example.
Okay? I think here we're gonna hit with this slide. We're gonna hit your statements here. Here we go.
This is the environment for healthy development of identity.
This solves the problem of giving a better option. Maybe it doesn't make it go away. But these are the words that we need to know as the church in a very personal way, not a formal way. There's certainly a place for formality, but this is not formal. Gary chose these colors very, very carefully. Look at these words. See this slide as nurturing, attentive, supportive, responsive, giving them individuality, letting them see individuality, showing them recognition and competence and love, giving them that connection through defined boundaries and clear roles.
Well, I don't have to be threatened by your individuality and you being an individual if we've also got defined boundaries and clear roles already substantiated.
So we know how to work
place.
together. We know how to function as a unit. We know how to function as a body.
But the dysfunctional demands conformity because it's threatened by the individuality because it doesn't have clearly defined roles and boundaries.
So how often in the development of our children do we know that they're mean to one another because you have to wear this specific brand of tennis shoe, right? Or you have to wear this specific T-shirt or whatever. You have to drive this specific vehicle and it has to be this age or you have no value. That's what we have to see. Non-conforming. Nurturing celebrates. Nurturing rejoices in individuality. Now, we're not saying run rampant. We're not saying go wild. There are boundaries. There are defined boundaries. I think we've got that on top for a reason. There are boundaries, but that individuality within those boundaries must be celebrated. That provides a better option for us in the church as a body, those young people that we are around, to let them feel a nurturing environment.
And competent professionals would have explored that with Chloe instead of shoving her down a conveyor belt line of conformity.
That's harsh.
I'll say it again. I'm going to say it 3 times at PTP next month.
To think of a conveyor belt for our kids. To think of a process like cattle. That's what's happening. And you know that. God's Word has to be at the center of our professionalism. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Have
All
a
right.
bee costume calling my name.
I know. Our time is up. Thank you very much. We knew tonight was going to be this way. We knew tonight was going to be with that. We wanted you to see that story, and we wanted you to end with this slide. So if you're taking notes, he hasn't taken it down just yet before he puts up for the kids. We've got a minute and a half. Feel free to write these things down. These are not just random words. These are clinical words that we try to use in everything that we do. Well, there went my minute and a half. It was a quick minute and a half. He's laughing at me up there now. So, as we have told you before, we're going to close out with this. If you know you need assistance, you've got our contact info. You know where we are. And we want to get that word out in the church, not just East Walker, not just North Jefferson, but in the church. We're at Coleman every day at Child Haven. It seems the central city of Coleman. If you know folks, I know we all know folks. We have a wide network. Don't be afraid to send them. We want to help. This is what we do, and we will guarantee that we come from the foundation of the Word. Okay? The kiddos are coming. I hear them coming. Thank you very much for your attention.